Dana Scott wasn't supposed to answer her phone. Not there. Not then. Not while polishing the last strip of marble in the grand lobby of the Paramount Regal. But the call lit up her screen, and it wasn't just any number. It was the university. She'd memorized that number like scripture. The Amsterdam Graduate Institute had declined her 6 times in 3 years. Each rejection chipped away at the version of herself she used to believe in. Valedictorian, multilingual, scholarship-worthy. Now, she was just a housekeeper whose resume had faded into some digital black hole. The ringtone cut through the usual hum of clinking glasses and distant elevator bells. She hesitated. Rule number 1, no phones during shift, ever. Rule number 2, never get caught breaking rule number 1, especially not by management. But that call, it wasn't just a call. It was the last sliver of the future she hadn't let go of yet. Dana stepped behind one of the oversized columns, far from the concierge's eye line, and whispered a greeting. Dana Scott speaking. Dutch spilled from the other end, crisp and unmistakable. She blinked. Professor Van Houten from the linguistics program. Dana answered immediately in flawless Dutch, her voice steady. He wanted to discuss her application. Apparently, there was an issue with the arrival time of her motivation letter. Something about a delayed upload in their system. She launched into an explanation about server times, submission receipts, her careful timestamp backups. Then silence. Not on the phone. Around her. No clacking heels, no buzz of conversation, just a blank hush she hadn't expected. Dana turned slightly and saw what had brought everything to a halt. Grant Warner, CEO of the entire Paramount Regal chain, was standing 5 feet away. He didn't look angry. He didn't look impressed either. Next to him, her manager, Melissa Drayton, looked like she'd just caught a shoplifter. No one said anything. Dana ended the call in Dutch, keeping her tone professional, like nothing unusual had happened. It took 2 minutes for Melissa to summon her with a single sentence. My office. Now. Downstairs in the basement, the air was always heavier. Dana followed Melissa through the narrow corridors, past storage closets and mop rooms. The door clicked shut behind them. You know the rules, Melissa said before even sitting down. No phones on shift, no exceptions. And what were you speaking? French? Dutch, Dana corrected before she could stop herself. Melissa ignored her. Doesn't matter if it was Klingon. Mr. Warner saw a housekeeper on her phone in the middle of the lobby, not working. That's what matters. Dana knew how this worked. She'd seen it before. The front desk agents could scroll Instagram behind the monitor. The catering staff could flirt with guests by the elevators. But Dana? Dana got written up if her shoelace wasn't double knotted. You'll be reassigned to the convention center bathrooms for the next 3 months, Melissa continued. Plenty of time to practice whatever languages you want, far away from our guests. It wasn't the location that stung. It was the implication. You don't belong here. You're lucky we haven't fired you. And of course, she wouldn't be paid overtime for those convention shifts. Just more work, less visibility, and no way out. Dana nodded once, left the room, and clocked out silently. That night, she sat in the apartment she shared with 2 nurses and stared at the frame above her mattress. Her bachelor's degree in linguistics from Georgetown. High honors. Next to it, a certificate in Mandarin from the Taipei Language Institute. And below that, a fading printout of an email confirming her acceptance into a regional translation contest she had once won. None of it had mattered. 6 years of dragging a vacuum behind her while sending out 47 job applications to language departments in every hotel in the city. 12 internal transfer requests, all blocked. Endless interviews where managers nodded politely, then sent generic rejections hours later. No one wanted a black housekeeper with a fancy degree. They wanted someone who fit the culture, someone who wouldn't make them question why she was mopping floors with a resume that threatened theirs. At 29, Dana had learned that being overqualified didn't open doors, it sealed them. Still, the call from Van Houten hadn't been a no. It had been a maybe. A maybe meant there was still a reason to wake up before the sun, tie her hair under the cap, and show up early, like nothing had happened. So the next morning, Dana arrived before her shift started. She checked the toilets, stocked the paper rolls, and prepped the cleaning cart like she always did. But when she reached the lobby, something was off. The front desk phone rang. Jennifer, the head receptionist, answered, then looked up. Dana Scott, Human resources needs you, now. HR was on the top floor, executive territory. She'd only been there once for onboarding, and even then, she hadn't made it past the waiting room. Inside the elevator, Dana stood in the back listening to two executives talk mergers and stock prices. They didn't notice her. They never did. At the 29th floor, the doors opened. "Miss Scott?" a voice said. "Please follow me. Mr. Warner's waiting." Dana followed the assistant down a short hallway lined with minimalist art. The air was quieter here, too quiet. Executives in sleek suits passed without acknowledgement. She was still in her uniform, shoes smudged from the morning shift. No one explained why the CEO wanted to see her. No one made eye contact either. When she entered the office, Grant Warner was standing behind a desk larger than her entire bedroom. He didn't motion for her to sit. He didn't ask if she wanted water. He just opened a folder and flipped a few pages before speaking. "Dutch, French, Mandarin, Italian. You speak all four?" Dana hesitated for a second. "Yes." Warner didn't look up. "And your resume says you graduated Georgetown. Linguistics, summa cum laude." She nodded. He kept reading. "Worked at Paramount Regal for 6 years. Housekeeping the whole time. No promotions, no transfers, not even a lateral move." Dana waited for the rest. "I asked HR for your file after I heard you yesterday. I heard how you spoke Dutch. Perfect accent. Not memorized phrases. You weren't faking it." He finally looked at her. "There's a trade conference starting tomorrow. Delegates from the Netherlands, China, a few multinationals from Singapore. We hired a translation team, paid a fortune. But after yesterday, I'm not confident we got the right people." Dana stayed still. "I want you to coordinate international relations for the event, temporarily." It took a moment to register. $5,000 a week. Starts today. She blinked. "Why me?" she asked. "Because I need someone fluent. Because you know what you're doing. And because I think there's something broken in my company that needs exposing." Dana didn't ask more. She nodded, and 20 minutes later, she had a new badge clipped to her chest, full system access and clearance for every floor. She walked differently now. Same pace, same stride, but people noticed. Especially Melissa. They crossed paths near the elevators. Melissa stopped mid-sentence when she saw Dana without her housekeeping uniform. Her eyes went to the badge, then back to Dana. "What are you doing up here?" Dana kept her voice even. "I'm working. International Relations Coordinator. Direct request from Mr. Warner." Melissa laughed once, dry and sharp. "That's impossible. You don't have the qualifications." Dana replied without blinking. "Georgetown, fluent in 6 languages. My resume's been in the system for 6 years. 12 transfer requests, all denied." She didn't stay to argue. She walked away. At HR, Dana met Zoe Becker, a recruitment analyst barely 3 months into the job. Young, sharp, and clearly out of place in a department that usually avoided eye contact with lower-tier staff. "I saw your file the week I started," Zoe said. "I flagged it to Whitmore. He shut me down in under 10 seconds. Dana wasn't surprised. She thanked her and moved on. The VIP room for the conference was being prepped. Dana reviewed the translation packets sent out to international guests. Most were fine, but the Mandarin materials were riddled with errors. Not just linguistic ones, but cultural. Some phrases were outright offensive in formal business settings. Others twisted meaning so badly that the contract offers like thinly veiled insults. She rewrote them, reformatted, repackaged. Hours passed before Warner showed up again. He leaned against the doorway, watching her cross-reference idioms with business dialects used in mainland China. "How'd you know they were wrong?" he asked finally. Dana didn't stop working. The phrasing implies mistrust. The wrong word for partnership can sound like an accusation. Whoever translated these doesn't understand nuance. Warner raised a brow. Whitmore swore he hired the best. The invoice was over 50 grand. "He hired someone without verifying credentials," Dana said, highlighting a key error in the proposal to the Chinese delegation. Warner nodded slowly. He didn't respond, but she could tell his mind was already moving. He didn't need more proof. He'd heard enough. By morning, the conference was in full swing. Dana moved between rooms, switching effortlessly between Dutch and Mandarin, fielding questions, smoothing awkward phrasing, intercepting cultural missteps before they could unravel meetings. She made the rounds, translating in real time, explaining subtleties no software could catch. Delegates noticed. Executives watched. At the coffee break, someone from the Dutch team recognized her. You wrote that piece in the Journal of Applied Linguistics on semantic drift in corporate translation, right? Dana nodded. A few more delegates joined in. One said he'd cited her at a conference in Brussels. Another had shared her article with a regional HR team in Rotterdam. It spread fast. By afternoon, half the room knew who she was, not as a cleaner, but as a published academic. Warner stayed mostly in the background, but Dana knew he was watching. What Whitmore didn't realize yet was that she was laying a trap. Every detail, every misstep, every inflated contract was being documented. She wasn't just coordinating a conference, she was building a case. There had been whispers for years about gatekeeping, favoritism, resume disappearances. Dana wasn't the first. She just happened to be the one who knew how to prove it. And she wasn't finished yet. On the morning of day 3, Dana arrived earlier than scheduled. The final round of materials had been sent to print the night before, her revised Mandarin translations approved and logged. She checked the welcome packets again, just to be sure. Everything matched her final version. Concise, respectful, calibrated for the tone expected in corporate East Asian diplomacy. But as she passed by the logistics table later that morning, something didn't sit right. A new stack of folders had been placed beside the podium. The labels read, Master Contract Mandarin. Dana flipped one open and scanned the first paragraph. The errors were back. Not similar errors, identical ones. The same flawed idioms, the same disrespectful tone masked as formality, the same dangerous misinterpretations that could unravel every deal signed that week. Dana didn't panic. She took a photo of the first page, then closed the folder. The name on the print order, Ashley Whitmore. She didn't need to guess. Whitmore was trying to overwrite her work. By the time she reached the top floor, Warner was reviewing hotel revenue projections in his office. Dana walked in without knocking and placed her phone on his desk. The screenshot was enough. Whitmore swapped my translations for his niece's version, she said. Again. Warner didn't ask if she was sure. I have time-stamped documents, screenshots, and both versions on file. I also found contract invoices paid to her company. Triple market rate, no credentials attached. He stood immediately. Before he could respond, Zoe from HR entered, holding a folder tight. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but I found something you need to see. Inside the folder were 5 years of hiring records, repeated patterns. Qualified candidates, bilingual, experienced, highly educated, marked as not a cultural fit. A large percentage were Black, Latino, or Asian, almost all of them women. The air in the room changed. This wasn't just an oversight, Zoe said. It's a system. At that moment, Whitmore walked in uninvited. The Dutch are ready to sign, he announced, but they're raising questions about some inconsistencies. Dana must have sent the wrong version again. Warner turned slowly. Thomas, I'm looking at a $50,000 invoice for work a housekeeper corrected in 2 hours. Care to explain? Whitmore blinked. We hire the best. You said it yourself. I said I trust competence, Warner replied. Your niece, Ashley, has no credentials in Mandarin. Dana just confirmed with Peking University. The certificate she listed doesn't exist. Dana placed a printed email on the desk. Confirmation from the university's registrar. Whitmore's mask cracked. You're a nobody, he snapped. A cleaning lady playing dress-up. PhD in applied linguistics, Dana said calmly. Georgetown, 6 international publications, all filed with HR for years. Warner didn't wait. Emergency board meeting. 30 minutes. Her resignation letter better be on my desk by then. Whitmore laughed nervously. You're not serious. Choose your next sentence carefully, Warner said. By noon, the executive auditorium was packed. Every manager, supervisor, and department head had been called in. In the front row, Dutch and Chinese delegates waited, unaware of what was coming. Dana stood backstage with Zoe. No script, no teleprompter. Warner walked on stage and went straight to the point. We've uncovered a scheme of discrimination, nepotism, and misappropriated funds that has cost this company more than just money. It's cost us talent, he said. For years, some managers implemented informal policies that excluded capable individuals from fair opportunities. Behind him, a screen lit up. Charts comparing employee qualifications with job placement, hiring trends by race and gender, and a trail of overpriced contracts linked to managers' family members. And now, Warner said, Ms. Dana Scott, who many of you only knew as a housekeeper, has prevented a multi-million-dollar diplomatic fallout this week by correcting translation errors made by unqualified contractors. Delegates nodded. Some clapped. Warner continued. Effective immediately, Thomas Whitmore is terminated. Sarah Drayton is suspended pending investigation. And an external audit of all hiring and promotion decisions over the last 5 years will begin today. There was no applause, just stunned silence. Then he turned to Dana. I'm also pleased to announce that Dr. Dana Scott is our new Global Director of Multilingual Communications. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then louder. Cleaning staff in the back stood up. A few were wiping their faces. Not for Dana, but for themselves. As she left the stage, Dana caught a glimpse of Whitmore being escorted out. His stare was venomous. You won't last a month, he muttered as he passed her. She didn't respond. In the pocket of her new blazer was a device that had recorded every threat, every whispered slur, every slip-up from the moment she had been promoted. She hadn't planned to use it, unless she needed to. That night, in her office overlooking the skyline, Dana sat alone. The door was locked. Her phone was silent. For the first time in 6 years, she allowed herself to say it out loud. I was right to wait. 6 months later, Dana's nameplate was bolted to the oak door on the 32nd floor. Dr. Dana Scott, Vice President of Diversity and International Relations. The office behind it overlooked Manhattan, but the view never distracted her. The real work didn't happen in corner suites or polished conference rooms. It happened in forgotten file cabinets and in names buried beneath layers of overlooked resumes. That morning, Zoe Becker entered with a tablet in hand and a small smile. Restructuring committee's ready, she said. All regional managers are dialed in. Dana stood, straightened her papers, and followed her assistant into the boardroom. It wasn't just another quarterly update. It was the culmination of a quiet revolution. The Invisible Talent Initiative had launched 4 months after Whitmore's dismissal. Dana insisted it not be symbolic. No branded posters, no press releases, just results. Her team combed through every department across all properties, housekeeping, laundry, catering, security, and reviewed internal applications, language skills, certifications, and disciplinary actions. Patterns emerged fast. She clicked the remote. The first slide displayed hard numbers. In 6 months, Dana began, we identified 147 employees with credentials and skills far beyond their assigned roles. 83% were Black, Latino, Asian, or from immigrant backgrounds. Most held degrees. Some spoke 3 or more languages. A few had even published work in their fields. One executive in Atlanta leaned forward. Another in San Diego nodded slowly. Dana continued, of those 147, we've already promoted 88. Retention in those roles is 100%. Outsourced translation costs are down 78%. International customer satisfaction is up 42%. And our diversity index now ranks first among hospitality groups nationwide. Grant Warner, seated at the head of the table, didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. This had been Dana's project from day one. Across the country, in a small conference room at a second-rate hotel in Fresno, Sarah Drayton watched the broadcast in silence. After weeks of internal review, she'd avoided termination by accepting a demotion and transfer. She now managed the laundry department in a property where no one knew her history. But the daily tasks were humiliation enough. For every resume she had once ignored, for every worker she had dismissed with a nod, this was the reckoning. Back in the boardroom, Dana moved to the next phase. The next step is mentorship, she said. Every promoted employee agrees to mentor 2 others in their department, identify hidden skill sets, and advocate for internal mobility. No one moves up alone, not anymore. No one objected. They couldn't. The data was bulletproof, and the timing was precise. Someone asked about Thomas Whitmore. Dana didn't flinch. Mr. Whitmore has not returned to the hospitality sector. His conduct and financial mismanagement disqualified him from most executive roles. Last I heard, he was managing night shifts at a roadside motel in Arizona. No one laughed. The silence was more honest. Ashley Whitmore had also vanished from the vendor system. After being forced to return all inflated payments and complete a professional ethics course, she enrolled in a Mandarin program, ironically using a scholarship established by the Coleman Foundation for Inclusive Language Education. The scholarship's first recipient, Ashley. Dana had approved it without a second thought. As the meeting wrapped, Dana turned to the camera broadcasting to all properties in the chain. She paused. I want to share something personal. No notes, no script, just memory. When I was little, my mother worked in a hotel just like this one. She had a degree in accounting, but she never worked in her field. She was told she wasn't the right fit, that someone else had more experience, that she could try again next year. Dana kept her tone steady. She used to tell me, Dana, your worth isn't defined by who notices you. It's defined by what you carry when no one is watching. She let the room sit in it. My mother died still believing some doors would never open for people like us. She didn't live to see this, but she's the reason I'm here. And if this initiative means anything, it means that sacrifice doesn't get buried under uniforms anymore. Across the screens, a few department heads lowered their eyes. A janitor watching from a break room in Chicago stood up slowly and clapped once before others joined. Later that afternoon, Dana returned to her office to find an envelope on her desk, no return address. Inside was a simple postcard of Amsterdam and a typed letter with a university seal. It was from Professor Van Houten. He had followed her story. He had read about the initiative, about the boardroom speech. He offered her a visiting professorship at the University of Applied Linguistics for the upcoming semester. No interview required, just confirmation. Dana placed the letter on her desk. A thought crept in. If Melissa Drayton had only given her a warning that day instead of a punishment, she might still be mopping floors with a resume collecting dust. The next morning, she announced a new scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, funded partly by her salary. The first recipient? The teenage daughter of her old cleaning colleague who had once dreamed of studying hospitality management. It began with a phone call in Dutch. Now it echoed through every hallway where silence used to reign. 2 weeks after launching the scholarship fund, Dana walked into a strategy meeting with the same intensity she once brought to scrubbing grout lines. The room was filled with regional directors from all over the country, some freshly promoted through the very program she built. They weren't here for another update. Today was about scaling what had started as a pilot into a permanent system. She opened with a screen filled with faces, employees in janitorial uniforms, kitchen aprons, parking lot vests, next to snippets of their hidden qualifications. One had built an inventory tracking app on weekends. Another spoke 5 languages and had volunteered as a translator for refugee families. A third had a background in accounting and had quietly corrected billing errors for a year without credit. Dana said nothing for a full 10 seconds. Then she clicked to the next slide. Talent doesn't need to be imported, she said. It's already on the payroll. We just have to stop looking past it. In California, Sarah Drayton watched the stream from a borrowed tablet in the staff break room. She wore a faded uniform with a stitched-on badge that said laundry supervisor. Every morning, she reported to someone 15 years younger, someone who used to ask her for vacation approvals. Now, she sorted towels. She hadn't touched a management-level decision since the day she signed the demotion papers. Dana moved on to numbers. Training costs had dropped. Legal risk related to discrimination claims had fallen by 38%. Productivity metrics had spiked in departments with internally promoted staff. Guests left glowing feedback specifically praising multilingual support and culturally sensitive service. And then there was the matter of the upcoming acquisition. Warner had made it clear. Any property joining the Paramount Regal family would be required to implement the initiative in its first quarter. That meant new roles, new mentors, and a growing list of voices that used to be kept quiet. One executive raised a hand. How do we handle resistance at legacy properties? Some of their senior staff still push back on internal promotion. Dana didn't flinch. They'll have a choice. Get on board or get out of the way. In the back of the room, Zoe Becker typed furiously. She had compiled a blacklist, not of people to fire, but of departments with statistical anomalies. All white hires despite diverse applicant pools, unexplained drop-offs in promotion timelines for women of color, and repeated use of third-party contractors with personal ties to management. Dana didn't want public executions. She wanted accountability. Back in Arizona, Thomas Whitmore stood behind the desk at a roadside motel. He had shaved the beard, changed his LinkedIn title to consultant. But nothing helped. Not when anyone could search the old news releases. Not when former interns became decision makers. He watched as his phone buzzed with job alerts he would never qualify for again. Dana didn't speak of him in meetings. She didn't need to. His absence echoed louder than any reprimand. Instead, she focused on the living proof. She brought in Derek Rivera, former security guard, now assistant director of operations in New Jersey. He told the story of how he used to rewrite safety protocols on his own time, submitted them anonymously, and watched someone else get promoted for presenting his ideas. He hadn't intended to stay in the hospitality industry, but when the initiative surfaced his name, he finally got his shot. Then there was Mina Tran. She'd worked in catering services in Houston. Quiet, efficient, always on time, fluent in Vietnamese and Spanish, certified in event coordination, ignored for 5 years. She now managed 2 departments and trained others to spot talent in entry-level teams. Dana closed the session with one last slide. A quote from a staff survey response. "Every day, I walked into work and erased part of myself to fit in. This program told me to stop erasing." She didn't say who wrote it, but she remembered the day it showed up in her inbox. It had been forwarded anonymously, sent from an old hotel email address no longer in use. The signature had been deleted, but the words stuck. Back in her office, Dana stared at the latest set of resumes flagged for the mentorship track. One caught her eye. A night janitor in Miami with a graduate degree in economics from São Paulo. Dana highlighted the name and forwarded it to the Florida regional director with one note: "Let's not take 6 years this time." That evening, a knock at her door interrupted her. It was Zoe, holding a thin envelope. "Thought you'd want to open it yourself," she said. Inside was the official accreditation from the University of Applied Linguistics. Her visiting professorship had been confirmed, along with the dates for a 3-week summer course on institutional bias and language barriers in corporate systems. Dana placed the envelope beside the postcard from Amsterdam. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. A familiar voice answered. "Hi, this is Dana Scott," she said. "I'd like to confirm. I'm accepting the role." After hanging up, she looked at the wall behind her desk. It was bare, no degrees, no awards, just a single framed sentence. "Leave the door open behind you." She had it made the day the first scholarship was awarded, and she meant it. 3 months later, Dana stood at the edge of a massive ballroom in Chicago, watching from behind the curtain as the final preparations for the annual Industry Leadership Summit unfolded. The event rotated cities every year, but this time, it felt different. Not just because she would be giving the keynote, not just because her name was on every brochure. It was the first time someone from the operations side, someone who had once clocked in with a mop bucket, would address the top 1% of hospitality executives in America. She wasn't there to entertain them. Across the country, streams of hotel staff tuned in from employee break rooms and overnight shifts. Dana's team had made sure it wasn't just a room of CEOs listening. The real audience was everywhere else. When she took the stage, the applause was polite, polished. She didn't wait for it to build. "I won't start with numbers," she said. "You already know them. They're printed in your folders and engraved on your investor dashboards. So let me start with something else." She told the story of a woman named Denise, housekeeping staff in Las Vegas, who had 2 degrees in marketing but had never once been invited to a team strategy session. Who used to revise menu layouts at night for fun, then watch them get replaced by outsourced graphics that guests ignored. Until someone from Dana's team spotted her talent during an internal review and brought her in. She now led digital engagement across 3 properties. The room was quiet. Dana moved on. "You didn't lose money because of global volatility. You didn't lose retention because of generational preferences. You lost because you ignored people who were already in the building." A screen lit up behind her, showing 2 contracts side by side. One from a boutique translation firm used by a legacy resort in Florida, overpriced, error-ridden. The other was from the newly built in-house team led by former staff from housekeeping and maintenance who had been fluent all along. Cost savings, 76%. Accuracy rating, 98%. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," Dana said, "but I am here to remind you that silence was expensive." After the speech, executives lined up to shake her hand. Some offered polite compliments, others asked for advice. But it was a woman from a boutique hotel chain in Denver who said what mattered most. "My staff cried during your broadcast," she said. "They didn't know someone like them could even make it up there." Dana didn't smile. She just nodded once and walked off stage. Later that evening, in her hotel suite, she opened her laptop. A live feed from the East Coast played across the screen. Footage of a new training center ribbon cutting in Atlanta. It bore a new name, the Dana Scott Academy for Inclusive Leadership. She hadn't asked for it. Warner had insisted. Across the country, programs were scaling. The scholarship fund had doubled. Guest satisfaction from multilingual service teams had triggered case studies in Ivy League business schools. HR protocols at every property were being rewritten, with external oversight and quarterly audits. Cultural fit was no longer an acceptable reason for rejecting a candidate. Every department now had a second reviewer for internal transfers. Back in Arizona, Thomas Whitmore sat in his motel's utility room, eating a sandwich under flickering fluorescent lights. He'd stopped applying to new roles. The industry was small. Word traveled. His name was no longer associated with leadership, only liability. He watched the summit from a cracked phone screen, watched Dana walk across that stage like she had been there her whole life. He didn't recognize the voice anymore, not because it had changed, but because it had never belonged to who he thought she was. Ashley Whitmore, now enrolled in a formal Mandarin program funded by the Coleman Foundation, submitted her first research paper last week. She had cited 3 of Dana's published works. The final line of her abstract read, "Language is not just communication, it's accountability." Dana's office remained the same. No trophies, no magazine covers framed on the wall, just a bulletin board filled with photos of scholarship recipients, internal promotions, and letters from employees who had found their way out of invisibility. She read every one. There was the night porter from Boston who used to write code between shifts and now ran back-end systems for hotel inventory. There was the line cook from Tampa who became a regional safety trainer, and the former janitor from Seattle, now running a bilingual guest experience program that had doubled their international bookings. One morning, a cleaning supervisor from Minneapolis sent in a short message. "I never thought someone would speak our names out loud." Dana printed it and pinned it next to the quote from her mother. "Your worth isn't defined by who sees you." The next wave was already forming. High schools had started reaching out, asking for curriculum partnerships. One university was launching a summer institute in Dana's name. She had been asked to contribute to federal guidelines for inclusive hiring practices in federal contracts. She didn't say yes to everything. But when a reporter asked what her proudest moment was, she didn't hesitate. It was seeing the daughter of a housekeeper walk across a stage to accept a scholarship with her mother in the front row, Dana said. "That moment didn't belong to me. It belonged to the door we never let close again." She didn't ask for applause. She just made sure there was always someone else walking in behind her. The final phase began without a press release. Dana had never been interested in endings that looked like awards shows. She cared about systems, not spotlights. That's why when her team proposed a celebratory campaign for the 1-year mark of the Invisible Talent Initiative, she asked for something else. "Give me results," she said. "Give me lives changed." And they did. The numbers were one thing. Over 200 employees promoted across departments, nearly 100 scholarships awarded, multilingual support embedded into all client services, turnover down, profits up. But it was the quieter victories that defined the legacy. A front desk agent in Detroit, who had once worked 3 jobs, now managed a training program for bilingual hospitality. A single father in Portland, once on the verge of quitting, now oversaw regional logistics. A former dishwasher in New Orleans, who hadn't spoken in staff meetings for years, recently presented to a boardroom of investors without skipping a beat. In every property, bulletin boards had been replaced. No more Employee of the Month based on hours worked or fewest complaints. Instead, Invisible No More. Profiles of team members whose talents had been uncovered, celebrated, advanced. Dana reviewed the final report from Zoe Becker the night before the board's annual retreat. The last page wasn't data. It was a handwritten note slipped in by Zoe without explanation. It read, "They used to teach us how to disappear. You taught us how to be seen again. The next morning, Dana boarded the early flight to D.C. The Department of Labor had invited her to speak as part of a new initiative exploring national standards for inclusive hiring. She didn't go for recognition. She went because it was the next necessary step. At the same time, back in Manhattan, Grant Warner hosted a surprise breakfast for the headquarters staff. No announcements, no photographers. Just coffee, bagels, and a printed email he shared aloud. An invitation to the Coleman Foundation to present at the United Nations Forum on Sustainable Development Goals, specifically on reducing inequality in labor systems. The program that started with Dana would now serve as a case study for the global stage. Back in Arizona, Whitmore walked through the back lot of his motel, keys in hand, adjusting the leaky water heater again. He no longer watched the broadcasts. He no longer sent out resumes. He didn't even tell people his last name anymore. He had become what he once weaponized, anonymous. Later that week, Dana returned to New York. Her office hadn't changed, but something on her desk was new, a sealed envelope from Amsterdam. The university had formalized her professorship. A second offer came with it, an honorary doctorate to be awarded at a fall ceremony. The card inside was signed by Van Houten. Sometimes the system rejects excellence not because it isn't needed, but because it makes others uncomfortable. Thank you for staying excellent anyway. She placed the envelope beside the rest, notes, printouts, scribbled quotes. Then she turned to prepare for her last meeting of the day. It was a small gathering, 4 employees, all from the original pilot program. One now led cross-cultural operations in Miami. Another had opened a career pipeline for immigrant workers in Denver. The third had just returned from speaking at an education summit in Seoul. The fourth, quiet, observant, a former night janitor, had recently published a policy proposal on multilingual leadership in corporate environments. Dana didn't speak much. She listened. That was the point. The torch had already passed. Not in one moment, but over a series of deliberate handoffs, invisible to headlines but tangible in every department. As the meeting ended, she handed each person a plain white envelope. Inside was a simple message. Mentor 2, Elevate 5, leave the door open. That night, she walked home instead of taking the car. No entourage, no assistant. She passed by a hotel she used to clean, back when no one knew her name, and every morning felt like starting over. She looked through the lobby window. Inside, a young woman in uniform was helping a guest find directions in 3 different languages, confident, fluent, and completely unaware that anyone was watching. Dana smiled and kept walking. Back in her apartment, she opened a worn notebook, one her mother had given her years ago. The pages were filled with lists, plans, clippings from job ads, handwritten notes about conference calls she could never afford to join. At the very back, one line in her mother's handwriting. If no one opens the door, build your own, and don't forget the hinges. Dana closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf. She had done that. But more importantly, she'd made sure no one else had to anymore. Because the lesson wasn't just about transformation. It was about replication. In the end, her greatest achievement wasn't becoming visible. It was helping the world see everyone else who already was. And the door? It stayed open. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's story. It means more than words can express. This journey wasn't just about one woman's rise. It was about what happens when courage meets opportunity, and when systems finally start to recognize the talent they once overlooked. The lesson is simple, yet powerful. True change begins when we stop asking people to prove their worth and start recognizing the value that's already there. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think, we invite you to support our channel. Just hit the like button. It's a small gesture that makes a big difference. Leave a comment below to tell us where you're watching from and how this story made you feel. We'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with people from around the world. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories coming. Stories that need to be told. Voices that need to be heard. Thanks again for being here.